Hi, friends. Before we get into the episode, I wanted to tell you again that I started a community just for you. I have a private space with verified widows and widowers. Every single person there has been verified that they are widowed. And within this page, there's also a course based on my book, Widow Goals Steps to Finding Peace When You Lose Your Spouse. And there's videos, quizzes, worksheets to help you through your grief. You're also going to find spaces to connect with real widows and widowers all over the world. And I hope you join that. And I've decided to give all the founding members 1 month for free. So you can check it out and see if it's something that you want to continue with. Just put in the code podcast. That's it. Just the code podcast, and you'll get your first month for free. So I will have the link in the show notes. I hope you will join me there, and on with the show. Welcome to Widowed Too Soon. This is Michelle Bader Ebersole. I'm excited to be back again with another amazing guest. So today we have with us Chris Moore. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. Well, thank you for being here. And I forgot to even ask this, like, where do you live? I don't even know where in the country you're coming from.
Okay, I am in Virginia in the Blue Ridge
Oh,
Mountains,
okay.
and so
Complete opposite of me, Washington State. So
yeah,
we're in totally different places. Did you grow up in that area?
I did. I grew up about an hour north of here, and then yeah, did some traveling and bumming around, and went to school in Massachusetts, and ended up on the West Coast, and eventually ended up back here. So
Okay. All right. Well, we have so many good things to cover. So I want to get right into this because we've got a story to talk about and then we've got a book to talk about. So let's go back to the beginning. This is my favorite part when I get to ask a guest because I can just see it in their eyes. Like it's fun to relive it. It's also painful, but it's fun to like go back. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your first wife. How did you meet her? What was your love story with her?
yeah. So first of all, let me say I love the title of your podcast
Oh,
because
thank you.
it's always too soon.
It's
I mean,
always, that's right.
it could be 100 years and it would be
Yep.
too soon.
Yes.
So we met and I was driving down the road in my truck and I was stopped at a stoplight and I look over and there's this woman in a little truck next to me smiling at me. And I'm like,
Oh,
wow, she's smiling at me. And so the light turned green and the lane I was in had to merge. And so I pulled in behind her and she pulled in the gas station and I pumped her gas and
no
we started
way.
talking and she came over to my apartment and we talked for about 3 hours and
What?
yeah, that's how it all got
That's a
started. And
crazy story. That's
she
like a
was
movie.
she was staying with her sister and she was had gone to the store to get steak sauce for dinner. And when she finally got back to her sister's apartment, her sister was like, "Where have you been?" She's like, "Well,
Hmm.
I got the steak sauce." She says, "Dinner's been over for hours.
Oh my
Where have
goodness.
you been?" And she said, "Well, I met this guy." She said, "Is he from around here?" He's not any good if he's from around here. No, but it's funny because when I would tell people that we met at the stoplight,
Yeah.
but she would tell people we met at the gas station.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Which is interesting because I think from a man's perspective, we met when our eyes met.
Yeah.
From a woman's perspective, we met when we had a conversation.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That is so
And
cute.
so, but yeah, that was how we met. And it was so funny because, years later and the kids would tell that story and people would say, well, I need to just go, hang out around some gas stations. And it's like, no, that's not a good
No,
idea.
no,
This
it's
is
not.
a,
No. Wait, but I'm trying to understand this. So like you both pull in the gas station and you're like, "Hey, can I pump your gas?" Like how does that work?
pretty much,
Yeah.
pretty much. I mean, we had, our eyes met and I liked what I saw and I guess she liked what she saw well enough to let me pump her gas and,
That's so
um, you
cute.
know, the rest was history. So
And then she lived far away. So did you start a long distance relationship?
no, no, no. She was, right down the street from
Oh, because she was
where I
staying with her
was.
sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And she had two little boys,
Hmm.
uh, Dennis and Joey. Dennis was 3 and Joey was 2. And so, we ended up getting together, and we ended up having 6 children total.
Oh, wow.
And so,
And what's
um,
her name? We don't have her
her
name
name
here.
is Barbara.
Barbara.
Yeah.
That's cute. So okay, there's a lot of stuff in between that happened. So I'm like, wait, 6 kids. Okay. So
Yeah.
you built this relationship. She already had 2 kids. You built this relationship. And then how long from the time you met to when you got married?
It was probably a year
Oh, wow.
total, because we got together and things were going really well, and then I get back to my apartment one day, and there's a letter, and she says, I have to tell you something. And then she wrote this whole letter, and she never
Mm,
told me what she was wanting to tell me. And so it turns out she was pregnant, and
mm.
she didn't want to tell me. But then, I couldn't find her. She, took off. So for a couple of months, I was like, every time I
Oh,
drive by her sister's
sorry.
house, I'd look over. And so, but then I get a phone call a couple months later. And, so we get back together, and Matthew is born. And then, we get married, and we buy a house, and um, have 3 more children. And in the process, when we first bought the house, we got married in October of 1989, and I was in construction. I was working for this company that was building Walmarts, and the company, right after we bought the house in October, the company went bankrupt. And so I didn't have any work from the day before Thanksgiving until the day after Christmas. And so we had this house, but we didn't have any work, and we didn't have, and Christmas was coming up. And then
Wow.
one day there's a knock on the door, and it's these 2 ladies from the Church of Christ, and they say, we would like to sponsor your family for Christmas.
Oh, nice.
And they brought us this big Christmas dinner, and they bought us a Christmas tree, and they took Barbara shopping with $400. And you could
Wow.
buy something with $400 in
Yeah.
1989. And so um, then we ended up getting saved in the Church of Christ. And so that was January of 1990. And 7 weeks to the hour after we were baptized, she went in the hospital with encephalitis.
Oh, wow.
And she said she felt like steel claws were ripping her skull open.
Mm.
And they ran all kind of tests. Nobody could figure out what was going on. And finally, it was an intern that's kind of put 2 and 2 together. And so they put her in a hospital room, and they put a quarantine sign on the door. And they, for 3 days, didn't tell me what was going on. She told me later she didn't know who I was.
Mm.
She knew she liked me. She said, but I couldn't figure out who this guy that kept coming to my hospital room was,
Wow.
because she lost her vision. She lost her speech. She had seizures. But she never forgot Jesus,
Mm.
and she never forgot her boys.
Yeah.
And she told me all this later, but that she's laying in the bed, and she could feel herself dying. She knew she was dying.
Wow.
And she said, Jesus, if you will let me live, I will teach my boys about you.
Mm.
And she felt the Holy Spirit come down over her like a quilt.
Wow.
And the next day she slowly started getting better. And it was interesting because she told me a story later about this lady, a candy striper, a volunteer that would come and sit with her and pray with her. And every night. And then when she started to get better and she was getting her speech back, she asked the nurses about this lady and described her in great detail. And the nurses said, there's nobody like that
Wow.
in this hospital.
Angel.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah.
Wow. And
So she started getting better. She came home. She was still having seizures. She was on seizure medication. They took her driver's license, and that really upset her. And so she prayed every day. She said, Jesus, you created the heavens and the earth, it would be a very small feat for you to slow my brain activity down enough where I can stop taking this seizure medication and I can get my driver's license back. And she prayed that every day for months. And she didn't tell anybody about it. She didn't tell me about it. She just prayed every day. And one morning in July, she woke up and she said to herself, I don't have to take my seizure medication anymore.
Wow.
And she never took it again.
Amazing.
And she never had a seizure again.
Miracle.
There were several times when she sort of started to feel one coming on and she would just drop whatever she was doing and go lay down, take a nap. But she never had another seizure.
That's amazing.
So, we raised our children. And
so was that when your children were young or before most of them, or?
Yes, that was when, that was right after we got married. So
So pretty soon into your marriage.
Yeah, Dennis, Joey, and Matthew. And then Rachel was born in 93 and Cody was born in 95 and Rebecca was born in 99.
Okay. So I just want to kind of get the time period there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that story of encephalitis is very important.
Yeah.
Because it changed my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And here's how that happened. Fast forward, it's December of 21. And Barbara says, I'm pretty sure I have pneumonia. Mm-hmm. But she didn't want to go to the hospital. It was still, all the COVID insanity going on. And so we did telehealth, got a antibiotic and a steroid, and it didn't help. And so we called them, got a stronger antibiotic and a stronger steroid, and didn't help. And so in January, we went to the emergency room and they did a chest x-ray and she did have pneumonia, but more to the point, she had stage 4 lung cancer. And it had spread to her bones. She had it in her spine, the back of her neck. So the oncologist walked in the hospital room and said, you have stage 4 lung cancer and there's no cure for it. Just as a matter of fact.
Sometimes they have no bedside manner, especially oncologists.
None.
Yeah.
None. And I was like, well, you might not have a cure for it, but I know somebody who does.
That's right.
And I was utterly convinced that she was going to be healed. I had no doubt in my mind. And we put together a declaration of faith, and I printed it all out. We believe in the healing power of the cross and the Holy Spirit, and Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we all signed it and took communion, and I didn't have a doubt. And so she was going through chemo and radiation, and several different rounds, and all of the side effects that come with that, and being weak, and without going into all that, it was rough. Yeah. And so we had just come back from UVA, University of Virginia Medical Center, on July the 14th, and her tumor was 75% smaller, and we were really encouraged. And the doctor at UVA said, let's take a break on the chemo and let you build some strength up, and then keep you out of the hospital. And those words ringing in my mind, keep you out of the hospital. Mm-hmm. So, but he said, there's a lot of fluid on the bottom of that lung. And up until now, there would have been no point in removing it because it would have just come back, but let's get that fluid drained. So we came back and went to local hospital, and they drained a pint of fluid out of her lung. And the next, 2 days, she really, really took a turn for the worse. It was getting really, really weak. But I kept hearing, keep her out of the hospital, keep her out of the hospital. And then my older daughter, Rachel, came over and she said, I think we really need to go to the hospital. And so we called 911, went to the hospital. They put her on a high pressure oxygen. And she said she was feeling a little bit better. But then she said, I feel nervous. Mm. And little did I know that was the last words I would hear her speak.
Wow.
Because I told the nurse, I said, she hadn't had her anxiety medicine. They had her on anxiety medicine. I mean, if cancer doesn't give you anxiety, I don't know what will.
Right.
And so they took the mask off to give her this pill. Never occurred to me that it would have to take the mask off. But when they took the mask off, her eyes rolled back in her head and her heart stopped. And they came in and got her heart started again. And then a little bit later, it stopped again, and they got it started a second time. And the doctor said, I don't think we can do it again if it stops. But they got her stabilized. They intubated her and got her into intensive care. And they told us that we could have as many people in the room as we wanted. They were really wonderful in the ICU. But her blood pressure just kept dropping through the night. The next day, and 2:00 the next afternoon, she was gone. Wow. And my son had just put on Rich Mullins, My Deliverer is Coming. And that was one of her favorite songs. And with My Deliverer is Coming playing, there came a peace in that room that was so strong and so powerful. And she died with a big smile on her face. And I remembered several years before that, seemingly out of the blue, she came to me and said, I just want to go home and be with Jesus. Yeah. And that memory and the peace in the room and the big smile on her face sustained me through the very dark days that followed. And the fact that my younger daughter, Rebecca, calculated that she had been sick for 33 weeks and we had been married for 33 years. And the day after she died, her brother texted me and said, God's really putting Psalm 33 on my heart. And I know Jesus walked the earth for 33 years. Yeah. I don't really understand numerology, but I know that there are patterns, and I know that numbers have meanings. And to me, that was just brought a sense of closure. Yeah. But where it comes back to the encephalitis was several months later. I'm walking along the river and just really having a hard time. And that memory came back to me that if someone had told me back in 1990, she's not going to die, she's going to live for 33 more years. Right. You're going to have all those years together. You're going to have 3 more children. I would have been ecstatic. Right. To know that I was going to have those 33 more years. And so I realized in that moment that I had a choice. And it's the same choice that all of us have, that we always have. In the darkest of hours, in the most difficult of circumstances, we have a choice of what is our perspective going to be. That's right. Are we going to focus on our lack, or are we going to focus on our abundance? Are we going to be grateful for the gifts that we have, or are we going to be upset for the things that we wish we had? And that revelation made all the difference in the world. Right. It changed my viewpoint. Yeah. Perspective shift. Perspective shift. For sure. And I've come to realize that suffering is a gift. I mean, those of us who have been widowed have a depth of understanding that you can see it when you meet somebody. I mean, you can feel it. It's true. Because you know that there's understanding. We're part of a club that none of us ever signed up for, and no one would ever sign up for. Right. But yet out of that experience and out of that suffering has come compassion and understanding that I don't think I could have gotten any other way. Right. I'm a remodeling contractor. I do a lot of aging in place work. We do a lot of grant work for disabled veterans and accessibility upgrades for people with, different types of progressive illnesses. And sometimes my clients pass away. Sometimes in the middle of a job, sometimes right after we get done, occasionally before we ever get started. Wow. And before I went through this experience, I felt bad for them, right? I mean, wow, that's really awful. And that was kind of as far as it went. Yeah. But now I get it. I understand. I can sit with them in their grief. That's right. I can, and a lot of times that's all you can do. There's nothing you can say. Right. There's nothing you can do, really. I mean, people bring covered dishes and they bring cards and flowers. then after a few months, everybody kind of goes back to their lives, and you're like,
Yeah.
what do you mean you're going back to your life?
Right.
I don't have a
My
life
own.
to go back to.
Yeah, my life was shattered. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But that perspective, that revelation, I really believe that was given to me. And the other thing, there's several times when I heard her voice, like when I was just feeling sorry for myself, and I heard her say, Chris, get up and get moving.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
We're still here. We still have work to do.
Yep. So what was it like for you? Take us back to like right after she passed away, the first days, weeks, months. What was life like? And, what were some things that helped you? Because those days are so dark and so hard.
Yeah. So, I held it together pretty good at the hospital. I was there, and my children were there, my nephews and my brother-in-law, and um, I kind of had to be strong for everybody. But then when I came home and walked in the door,
Oh, yeah.
and all of the reminders,
Hmm.
throughout the house, and it just hits you, and
Hmm.
you just broken, and it hurts to breathe.
Yes.
It hurts to breathe. Um, and Rebecca, our youngest, who lived at home still at the time, and so she was 23, and so she was home still, and we, you know, tried to take a day at a time
Yeah.
and get through it. We were blessed. We had just bought a piece of property the year before, in July of 21, 16 wooded acres. All of our married life wanted to get out of town and be out in the countryside. So we had
Hmm.
this piece of property. And when we were making funeral arrangements, I said, I wonder if we can bury her on our property, because I knew that, different states have different
Right.
laws about that kind of thing. And my son Joey, he said, "Oh yeah, you can. I looked into it." I said, "You did? Why?" He said, "Oh, I don't know. I just got curious one day." And so we went down to the county and found out what we had to do, and we carved out a plot on the property, and it's back in the woods. It had to be 300 feet from any water and 250 feet from any structure. Um, and so me and three of my sons, we hand dug her grave
Wow.
in the woods.
Wow.
And that was a very, very healing
Hmm.
time. Um, and we had a bagpiper,
Oh, wow.
because she really loved the bagpipes.
Yeah.
And we did a natural burial in a wicker casket. And the funeral director said it was the most significant service he had ever seen in his career. Which, I thought it was just pretty basic, but it was real.
Right.
And one of the things that hit me was how shrouded, for lack of a better word, the whole process of death is.
Hmm.
They kind of keep it sanitized behind closed doors.
Right.
Except that when it's your loved one, it's not sanitized at all.
Hmm.
It kicks you in the teeth. And you're like, why didn't somebody tell me it was going to be like this?
Yeah.
And I had buried my mother and my father, but it didn't prepare me for
Right.
it. It's not the same,
Yeah.
So, and then I got out of town a lot,
Yeah.
because it was hard being in the house.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to Camp Widow,
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah. I've never been to that, but I've heard great things.
and that was in Tampa. That was in March, so it was 8 months out. And you walk into a room, and there's 250 widowed people in
I
the
get it.
room,
Hmm.
and it was. And then I went and I did a 2-week trip with God's Pit Crew.
What's that?
God's Pit Crew is a
I like the
disaster
name.
relief organization, and they do immediate disaster response, like after a flood or a tornado or a
Yeah.
hurricane. They go in and clean up. but they build people's houses. And that was the part
Okay. Yeah, you're
that,
good at that.
because that's what I do. I'm a contractor.
Right.
And so in 2 weeks, and this was in Eastern Kentucky, there was a family and their whole house had washed down the river when it flooded. It was 85 volunteers, and we showed up and in 2 weeks built a house and handed them the keys, food in the refrigerator, linens on the beds, pictures on the walls. And that was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so
Um,
great. I feel like
and
those are two key things that you just said. I want to point out that you did. You connected with other people who were widowed, so you found your people, and then you gave back. Those
yeah,
two things I think are so important in healing, and a lot of times people don't do either of those. And
right.
so I want to encourage everybody listening that those two things can be really huge for your healing, and that those are great things. But go ahead.
Yeah. And I think anybody that's hurting from anything in any way,
Yeah.
if you can help someone else, it
Yes.
will help you heal because it
100%.
takes your mind off of your
Yeah.
troubles when you help someone else. And I don't care how bad off you are, you can always find somebody that is worse off than you are.
Yes.
I broke my hand years ago working on a construction site, and my hand was in a cast for, I don't know, 4 months. And one day while I was doing that, it made it, hard to do
Yeah.
stuff when your hand's in a cast. But next door, this guy pulls up and starts doing carpenter work on the house next door. And I went over to talk to him. He didn't have a right hand.
Wow.
Suddenly, my right hand being in a cast seemed like a very small thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's perspective again.
Perspective. That's right. I love that those
Um,
things, helped you giving back and connecting with widows. And I know we have so much more to cover. There's so much more of your story, because I know that you did go on to find love again. Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's something that a lot of widows and widowers are curious about. Like, how do you do it? What is it like? So can you share, your story of that?
Yeah, and one of the things that one of the workshops I went to at Camp Widow was a guy, and he had an illustration. He had two cups in his hand, and he said, "This cup holds my love for," and I don't remember either of the women's
Yeah.
names, but this was his late wife, and this is my cup that's full of my love for her, and it's
Yeah.
just as full today as it ever will
Exactly.
be, and it ever has been, and
I
that
like
doesn't
that.
change. And this cup over here has my love for the new woman in my life, and one doesn't negate the other,
Exactly.
because one of the enemies I think that widowed people have to combat with intention and vigor is guilt,
Yep. Hmm.
right? Because so many find themselves feeling guilty for having joy,
Yes, they do.
or feeling guilty for being interested in having a new marriage, or being happy in any way, because you're supposed to be grieving,
Hmm.
you know, and stop shoulding all over yourself. You should does not, is not a word that you should even have in your. Oh,
You should. You're
yeah,
shooting.
I am doing it to myself. But the point is that there's no timeline,
Right.
there's no roadmap,
Right.
you have to find what works for you.
Hmm.
And it was interesting because prior to this happening, there were several people that I knew who had been widowed and got remarried, and my first reaction was distaste. How could you do that?
Right. So we don't understand in the beginning.
We don't understand, but then we find ourselves in that position. And I liked being married.
Hmm.
I remember hearing somebody say, "Well, if your spouse died and your first thought was, wow, I'm glad that's over, and never want to do that again, then that would be kind of like insulting your late spouse. But if you have good memories and you enjoy that fellowship and that closeness with another person, then. But I just didn't like being alone. It was
Right.
I couldn't. And for months, my my verse was Genesis 2:18. It
Mm.
is not good for the man to be alone.
Yep.
And so it wasn't good for me to be alone. So, but I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do about it?
Right.
And what people do these days is they do this thing called online dating.
Yep.
And that seemed kind of
It's a jungle out
sketchy.
there. It's crazy,
Yeah,
to
that
say the
seemed
least.
kind of sketchy. Uh, I'm not so sure about that. Um, and then I had four in a row that asked me for money before
There's
they ever
so many
met
of
me.
those.
And I'm like, I really think
Scam,
this is getting
scam.
sketchy.
Yep.
um, and then um, and then I saw Michelle's profile and I thought, wow, this looks like a real person.
Yes.
And, it showed her hiking, and I always loved to hike and, being outside. And so, we messaged back and forth a couple of times and talked to her one time on the phone. And then um, I, kind of left a message. I said, well, I'd really like to meet you in person. She lived about an hour and a half away. Then the next day I went on the platform and her profile was gone. I was like, what? I thought we were getting along so well. Then I said, wait a minute, I have her phone number.
Yay. That's good.
Uh, so I sent her a text. And I said, did me saying I wanted to meet you in person offend you in some way? And she said no, and that there were just some guys being jerks. Can you imagine guys being jerks?
I've seen
Hmm.
it on these platforms. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we met on April the 16th of 23, and just immediately were like we'd known each other forever.
Mm.
And we got married on August the 5th.
Wow.
And everybody's kind of theme song was Already.
They
And, my
don't get to
kids,
judge. Like,
my,
it's your life.
yeah,
They don't get to
my
judge.
kids were pretty sure I had gone off the deep end. But, when you know, you know.
Mhm.
And so, um, and she's from Connecticut originally. And she has four children. So her four, my six makes 10.
Wow.
And her youngest just turned 16. So I have a teenage daughter again.
Yeah.
And I tell people that Nadia is my full quiver. I think it's Psalms 127 where it said, "Blessed children are blessing from the Lord. Blessed is
Yeah.
the man whose quiver is full of them." And somewhere, someone told me that a full quiver was considered 7 arrows at the time. So she's number 7.
Nice. Yeah,
So,
that's in your dating process. Did you ever have grief?
yes, um, in fact, on our second date, I took Michelle to Barbara's grave, and she stood there with me, and I was crying, and she promised her she would take care of me.
Oh, that's
And
beautiful.
I mean, um, and I've heard stories of people who've remarried, and the new spouse, once all the late spouse's stuff, removed, and
No, that's
don't
horrible.
want you to talk
Mm-mm.
about them, and no, she's never been like that at all. And she's been very gracious about coming into the house that I shared with Barbara, and but we're planning on building a house on the property
Mhm.
that'll be our house, and
Yeah.
so I really want to make that happen.
Mhm.
Um, so
Yeah. It takes a really special and confident person to marry someone who's been widowed.
yeah,
Because I think what happens, I've seen it with other people, is the person feels threatened that you're dating or married to. They're threatened by it, but the right person will not be threatened. Like Joel is not threatened of Luke. Like we have pictures, we talk about him. I took Joel to Luke's grave when we were dating. Like it's a part of who we are, and so whoever
right,
we decide to date and marry again, like they have to be okay with that. When people tell me that they're dating someone who's not okay with them, like run. That's a red flag. If you're
yeah,
dating and they don't want you to talk about him, it's going to get worse if you get married. So,
right, right,
we
yeah.
have these special people who understand.
Well, I think that marriage, the way God designed it, is that we grow by putting the other person first.
Yeah.
And men and women are so different. And it's so ridiculous, when people talk about, oh, there's no difference in, this whole secular viewpoint on gender
Right.
and all. Um, but we are. I mean, the physical differences are the smallest differences. The way that we process emotions, the way that we interact with others is we operate on a different wavelength. And God intended it that way. That's the
Right.
basis for family, because children need nurture and they need structure,
Yes.
both. And God put in the feminine aspect that motherly nurture, and in the masculine aspect that direction and that teaching and that structure.
Right.
And it's not that one's any more important than the other. They work together. And in a marriage, when we learn to put the other person first and to respect those differences and to uphold each other, it makes us a better person.
Mm, that's
And
right.
I think because human nature, we're inherently selfish. We go into marriage saying, well, you meet my needs and then I'll think about meeting yours. And
Right.
it doesn't work that way.
No, not at all.
It doesn't work that way at all.
Hmm.
But yet when we put the other person first and we do it God's way, it's so wonderful.
Hmm. Yeah.
And if people would just recognize.
Right. Exactly. It would be so much easier. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about your book. Tell us
Okay.
the name of your book and what
Okay.
inspired this.
The book is Age Out Loud.
Love it.
How to live a purposeful, fulfilling life in the years that matter most.
Okay. Tell us about it.
And um, really, I think the revelation that I described earlier, um, probably more than anything, really kind of got it started. I have a chapter, How to Survive Devastating Loss and Thrive in the Aftermath. And then in my work, where I work with people who are struggling with mobility impairments, and yet they don't want to consider putting in a grab bar or a ramp or widening
Right.
doorways or doing anything that would make their life easier. And I came to realize it's because people have a negative interpretation of what it means to get older.
Right.
And they think that getting older means getting weaker and sicker. And just because that's common doesn't mean it's normal, because it isn't normal. There are places in the world, there are 5 places in the world called the blue zones, where people
Oh,
routinely live to be 100 plus,
I saw that on
healthy,
Netflix.
healthy and active
Hmm.
and moving. And that is actually normal.
Hmm.
And this idea that we have in Western civilization, that we work for 40 years and then at 65, it's time to quit and, do nothing and just sit around,
Yeah.
is insane.
Yeah.
I'll be 64 in July, and I'm just now starting to figure out life.
Right.
Um, and so recognizing that people can choose to alter their mindset. They can choose to be grateful for the things that they have, the blessings that they have.
Yes.
And if you have the belief that your mindset affects your life, then you're likely to have habits that will make you live longer and healthier. You'll
Hmm.
probably eat better. You'll
Hmm.
probably move more. You'll probably take time to spend with people you love and enjoy their fellowship.
Hmm.
But if you think you're going to get weaker and sicker no matter what you do, you're not going to bother doing any of that stuff.
Right.
And so, that was kind of the beginning of the book. And the more that I researched these topics, and the more I saw how insidious this cultural narrative is that denigrates old age,
Right.
worships youth,
Uh-huh.
and denigrates old age, where in more traditional societies, the elderly are held in high esteem. They're
Hmm.
looked at as a source of wisdom and knowledge and understanding. And I think we need to get back to that. And with regards to housing, I think that the whole multi-generational housing idea, there's a chapter in the book called The Rise and the Fall of the Waltons Model, where the Waltons, the grandparents and the parents and the kids all lived under the same roof. And um, the wisdom of the older generation was passed on to the younger.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have the tendency to put all the old people over here and all the young
Right.
families over here and all the college students over there. And I think we suffer from that.
Mm-hmm.
We miss blessings that we could receive if we were to spend more time around people that are different than us, not just different generations, but different backgrounds,
Right.
and different beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's gotten to the point where nobody talks to people that disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
And we should be able to have a discussion,
Right.
or even a robust debate with somebody that disagrees with us without being disagreeable.
Right.
And I think we've lost that in large measure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what inspired you to write the book? Like, have you always been a writer, or was this something after your wife passed away you decided to start doing, or how did that part of it start?
I've always kind of thought it would be cool to write a book. Maybe not always, but for a long time. I wrote a monthly column called Housing Matters in a print publication called the Senior News for 13 years. So, I had some experience writing, but nothing so ambitious as a book.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a little bit daunting to,
Yeah.
sit and, you have all these ideas, but how do you condense them
Mm-hmm.
and, make sure they all fit together and it's not just a random collection of thoughts.
Right.
I mean, if it was just a random collection of thoughts, it would be easy because, I mean, I can randomly collect thoughts all day long.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But to put it together in a kind of cohesive message. But I think it's a message that people need to hear.
Yeah,
And I've
definitely.
gotten a lot of good feedback from people that told me they got a lot out of it. And I think part of that is that I've been very transparent in what I've been through and the lessons I've learned and kind of how I see the way that mindset affects
Mm-hmm.
your experience of aging.
It's huge. So
Yeah.
how did you go about writing it and putting it all together? Did you have someone help you, or did you just figure it out, or?
So what we did, I have a business coach by the name of Myron Golden, and he had a seminar on writing books. And what he recommended you do is that you do webinars and you record the webinars.
Mm.
So what I did was I wrote the outline. I had 12
Yeah.
chapters, and then we did 12 webinars over a period of 12 weeks, and each we put together the theme of what we're going to talk about, and then we did the webinar, and then we took the transcript of that and then went through it and made changes and added things and took things away. And then I had it was actually a veteran that we had built a house for. He lost both legs in the service, and we built a completely wheelchair accessible house with motorized cabinets and all kinds of cool things. And was over there after we finished the house with a architecture class from Virginia Tech. The professor had called me and wanted to know if we had some projects they could tour. And so I mentioned the book, and his wife, who teaches Latin and law, she said, well, I'm a professional book editor, right? And I'm like, no, I did not know you were a professional book editor. So she did the editing for me over Christmas break last year. And so we got the book out. The book came out on January the 15th. The evening before, I was speaking at a conference in Dallas, and I was trying to get it out before my speaking engagement. It came out the evening before, 7 p.m. the night before on Amazon. So that was like right under the wire. Mm-hmm. And my youngest daughter did the
I love the cover.
The
it's
cover
very
art.
like catchy, like it catches your eye.
Yeah, and the little silhouettes in the cover, they're kind of like coming out of the paint. They're like little people. Those are the chapter headings for each chapter in the book.
Oh, it's so creative.
So it's like coming out of the color, and then I've also got a chapter, why are the trees most brilliant in the fall? You don't have that so much in Washington State, but
No,
here in
we
the
do.
East,
We have
we
lots of
have the,
bright trees. Yes.
yeah, okay.
Depends on where you live in Washington, but we have bright trees. Yes.
Yeah. So in the fall, all the trees go from green to yellows and reds and goldens and all this beautiful display of color
Right.
right at the end of their lives. And so
Mm,
I use that as an allegory for how our lives can be the most colorful and most brilliant at the end. And I have stories in the book of different people who, started their what they're known for at the end of their life.
yeah.
Colonel Sanders started Kentucky Fried
Oh, yeah.
Chicken, in his 60s, and Grandma Moses started painting. I think she was 74 when she started painting, and painted every day until she was 101. And just lots of stories about people who reinvent themselves
Right.
and don't buy into that life peaks at 40 or 50 and it's all downhill from there.
Right.
They choose to believe that my greatest adventures may still be in front of me.
Right. And it's like,
And I
what if,
think that is such an important message for people to hear,
mm-hmm.
because so many people feel invisible,
Right.
when they get older and they're don't really feel like they're valuable anymore. I watched a YouTube video this morning, and it was a woman. She said, I'm 83, and I tried living with my daughter and her family for a while, and that didn't really work. And then I tried this assisted living for a while, and that kind of felt like I was in prison. And I tried this and I tried that and I tried the other thing. And then she was taking a walk, and she overheard one of her neighbors who was a single mother, and she was having a hard time because she kept having to leave work early to pick her 8-year-old daughter up from school, and she was getting in trouble at work. She thought she was going to get fired. She didn't know what she was going to do. She was in tears. And so this 83-year-old woman walks up and said, I walk right by your daughter's school every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be more than happy to get her from school and take her home with me until you get off of work.
Wow.
She was like, oh, no, I couldn't ask you to do that. She said, you're not asking me to do it. I'm offering. And so they did that. And then the young mother started bringing dinner over, and pretty soon they're really good friends, and they're interacting. And she was talking about, well, maybe this might not work for everybody, but that sense of community, that sense of we're here to help each other.
Right.
And if I can do something for you and you can do something for me, that's community. That's the way we're supposed to live.
Right. I love that.
And I just thought that was such a great message.
Yeah, that's great. Well, to wrap it up, if you were sitting down with a brand new widow or widower, what advice would you give them? And there's a million things you can choose from here.
Yeah.
Just maybe something that helped you in your journey.
Well, I think that if you're brand new, I think you don't have to do anything. I would recommend that you embrace the hurt. Don't try to run from it.
Yes.
Don't try to medicate it. Don't try to cover it up. Just experience it. As much as it hurts, the only way through the valley of the shadow of death is to walk through it. Yeah. And I remember in those hard days, and I had Sirius XM radio on my car, and it had on the Southern Gospel station, and over and over and over and over and over, when I got in the car and I needed it most, there was a song that came on that just healed me. Mm-hmm. Never Been by Jason Crabb, the Crabb Family. And it says, I've never been more brokenhearted, but you've never been more alive.
Wow.
And that's a powerful one.
Yeah. So good.
And find something that helps. Find something that makes you feel a little bit better. Whatever that is for you. Don't judge it, just appreciate it. If it's a song, if it's a walk, if it's a certain place, if it's a certain whatever it is. Yeah. Whatever it is. And be thankful for those moments when you get a little bit of relief. And, we've all heard time heals all wounds. And I don't think that's true.
It's not. This is a big grief myth.
But I think that time can soften
Yeah.
the sharpness of the pain.
Yes.
And time can also, if you allow it to, it can bring back memories of the good times. Because at first, all you feel is the pain.
Hmm.
All you feel is the anguish of soul. But over time, if you will allow it, and you can get this sometimes you're looking through pictures and you see a picture, or you hear a song, or you go by some place that was important to your relationship, and you remember a time when you were laughing together, and there was joy, and there was happiness, and there were moments of, and those moments of happy memories over time can become a bigger part of your memory,
Hmm.
and the overwhelming anguish and grief can become a smaller,
Yeah, that's right.
and allow the process to take place,
That's good.
because the healing will make you a better person if you allow it to. We all have a choice, and I've seen people who chose to melt into a puddle on the floor and never come back.
Yeah, I've seen him too. Hmm.
And that's tragic,
Yes,
because those of us who are still here for a reason.
that's right.
We still have work to do.
That's right.
Our loved ones would want us to
Exactly. It's
keep
great
going.
advice. Very
Yeah,
good advice. Well, is it okay if I pray for you?
of course.
All right. Dear God, I just thank you so much for Chris. Thank you for his story. Thank you that through the suffering, you have brought him to his purpose in life. And I just pray blessings over his marriage with Michelle, and their blended family, that continues to go well, God. And thank you for this book that you put on his heart. Help us to embrace this, that really, like it just gets better with time. And you didn't want us to just sit around as we got older, God, but you've given us so much more. As long as we're here, we have a purpose. And I just pray that this book goes out far and wide, God. And I also pray for every listener today that you will continue to heal them. They might be in that really dark space right now, but I just pray for something, maybe a song or something to bring them joy, that they will find those things to smile about today, right today, as they're listening, that you will bring them joy and continue to heal them. And we just thank you for the gift of technology that we can be here today. And we just thank you for all you've done for us. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you, Chris. Well, tell us where we can find your book and find you and all that stuff.
Okay, so my website is ageoutloudbook.com,
Love it.
and I write on Substack under Age Out Loud.
Okay.
And my podcast, Aging in Place, is a
Yes.
team sport.
Love that.
And I also have YouTube channel, Senior Remodeling Expert.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure we get all those links, and your book is on Amazon. You know that.
It is.
Okay,
Yep.
awesome. And it's on Kindle Unlimited, which is great for people that have the subscription. I do my book on a Kindle Unlimited too, so everyone can access it. So I love
Yeah.
that. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your story. Is amazing. I love what you're doing with your life and helping people to understand that they can age out loud, and that aging is not a bad thing, and it's a good thing because we're still alive. We're still here.
That's right.
So, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.